Oliver Stone said that the charges against Trump are ridiculous. He seems to have gone off the deep end. He's going against himself almost. Let's see. Something one of the hostages was saying that he was badly treated by Hamas. What else is new? South Africa's foreign minister says South African citizens fighting with Israeli forces in Gaza will be arrested when they go home, if they go home.
Wait, say that again. South
South Africa's foreign minister says any of their citizens, South African citizens, fighting with the Israeli forces in Gaza will be arrested.
Oh, on the side of the Israeli forces,
Yeah.
not against them.
Right. I guess if you're fighting against them, you're welcome home. But
Yeah.
so I guess it's going to be the population of South Africa is going to diminish a little bit because those guys aren't going to go home. Let's see. What was the other thing? One of the hostages was confirmed dead. NATO's foreign minister says it's ready. NATO's newest member, Sweden, says it's ready to fortify a strategic island in the middle of the Baltic Sea, close to Russia. That's interesting.
A Swedish island.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's probably contested, but I guess Sweden has it for now. And well, I'll put it this way.
What's the name of the island?
I don't know. I got to go to the article.
Okay.
Let's see. Here we go. It says, oh, Gotland, Gotlands.
Oh, wait a second. Gotles?
Lands, Gotlands.
Oh,
Gotland.
Scotland's.
No, Gotland.
Gotland's. Yeah, I got it. Gotland Island.
Right.
And it's in between, it's off the coast of Sweden. Oh, I'll show you on it. Do you see the screen here? I don't know what you're on.
I've got to go off this to see the screen. Hold on.
Okay, well, I'll just talk it to you, but let me just show it.
No, I can go back on the
Oh, you can go back on? You can't talk anymore, huh? If you go.
No, I can't look, I can't see your screen and the articles at the same time.
Oh, okay. So let me interrupt and show you the map, and then you can talk about it. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm just going to a map, that's all, to give it
Right.
reality. So here's the island. Let me get these things off the side here. Whoops, close that down. Here's the island.
Well, they're saying it's close to Russia. It doesn't look that close to Russia.
Well, this is it, Gotland.
Yeah.
Here's Stockholm, Sweden. This is Lithuania. There's a little part of Russia that sticks out here. I think it's this thing. It's a strange thing that Russia has some land right here. I think this is it. It's either this or this. They have a port on this ocean that they use.
That's Kaliningrad. Yeah.
Does that look like Russian to you? That looks like Russian, right?
See,
it says, look, see what it says?
Yeah, it says Russia. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so this is a Russian territory. They own that and they don't want to give up, even though it's landlocked on the east side, right, because it gives them access to the Baltic Sea.
Right. But the problem is that
and excuse me, and then here, Moscow, look up here. So up here, St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
So that's why they're fortifying it, because from here, Russia would say, oh, this is ours. They could.
Right.
So
also, that gives Sweden more control over the Baltic Sea.
Sure.
It's so Russia can really threaten the Baltic Sea, and it also gives them an extra base. It's protecting Lithuania and Poland and Latvia, Estonia and Finland. Even though, I mean, Sweden is not that much further away. It's just like having a base a little bit further out. But that little area of Russia where Kaliningrad is, if they were going up towards St. Petersburg, that would become more problematic for them.
For Sweden to defend up
No,
here.
more problematic for Russia
Oh, all
because
right.
if they're going
Well,
between Kaliningrad and St. Petersburg up there,
yeah.
uh, then up near Finland.
You see
Uh,
those pretty turrets? You see that building?
yeah, that's St. Petersburg. Oh, I was there.
Oh,
It's a
wow.
beautiful city. Yeah, but
Had a
the
girlfriend there or something? Why'd you go there?
no, I got one of those. I was on one of those with six you get egg roll cruises with my family.
Oh,
In other words, where because they were six of them were going, my parents, my brother and sister-in-law, and my parents' best friends. I got to go for like a quarter of the price or something like that.
right.
It
Well, that's
was,
good.
yeah, but anyway, we stopped in St. Petersburg during the White Nights. It was great,
See, now
but
these islands here, not
those,
just those must belong to Estonia or something.
yeah, those are
Latvia.
crucial for Estonia and Latvia. I mean,
Yeah,
you
right
can't,
there. Right.
yeah, that must be Estonia. But anyway, that Kaliningrad is, yeah, it's the last port that Russia has on the Baltic Sea. The one in
Right.
St. Petersburg, they got to go through between Finland and Estonia, and
Oh,
but this
this
way,
is it down here. Yeah.
yeah, they got direct
It's
access.
just north of Poland,
Right.
between Poland and Lithuania, and it's
I wonder,
Russian.
yeah, but I wonder what the situation is there now. Now that this war is going on, and both Poland and what's it north of it? Which is the one north of it?
Oh,
Lithuania.
Lithuania. Yeah.
Poland and
Well,
Lithuania.
let's just look it up in, I know it's going to tell us Kaliningrad, right?
Why Kaliningrad, Russia's toehold in Europe, could be the next
All right,
whatever.
let's see what it says. There you go. So now you see the whole page.
Right.
Russia's toehold in Europe could be the next flashpoint in its war against the Ukraine.
Yeah. I don't know
See,
when this article was published. Could have been 2 years ago.
no,
Uh,
no, yes, it was
uh,
almost to the day, June 22nd, 2022.
yeah, yeah. So um, I don't think it's the next. It obviously didn't become the flashpoint when they thought it would be, but
Right.
yeah. But I mean, that would seem like that would be what Russia would worry about if uh, when the Swedes fortify this island.
Well, here's this fate has taken us to take a look at this one thing here. I'm trying to see how I can zoom in. This thing looks very suspicious. Suwalki Gap between Russia, that Kaliningrad and
Yeah.
Belarus. So that could be it looks like Russia is saying, oh, that's ours too, that little passageway.
Well, they need it, but
Well, let's see what it says. Let's find that could be a significant issue. Let's see,
mhm.
easy to check. Uh, okay.
No, they're going to screen them as they leave Rafah.
All right, all right.
So they're going to let civilians out
Who's
of
going to screen
Rafah,
them? Who's going to
but of
screen
course
them?
they don't want the Israelis.
Okay,
It's going to be a pain in the ass. It's going to be like going through one huge airport security thing. They're going to have to screen them for weapons. Um, make sure they're not. I mean, they'll be lucky if they get, you know, 10,000 people a day through something like that. So it's probably going to take. I mean, to get everybody out of Rafah is probably going to take at least several weeks. When I say everybody who's clean, um, but the but once they get up there, I don't think Israel has a real problem with the Americans sending in hospital ships once they Israel has screened everybody. I mean, they're not interested in just killing Palestinians like Alex would say or something like that. They want to destroy Hamas, so that'd be much easier for them. But I think Hamas and Hezbollah are going to target that
right.
dock,
And then what
and
happens? And
the
then they try to get the U.S. entangled, and so that they can say, now we're fighting Israel and the U.S. There's no doubt about it. Death to America, and it just get all of the ISIS, I don't know what name to use for it, the international group of terrorists together and start attacking U.S. bases all over and try to promote a big war. That's the goal. That's what they
but
want. They
then
want it to escalate.
yeah, but the only problem is that that type of escalation, for instance, um, any, in other words, any person supporting Hamas after that, any Palestinians supporting Hamas after that, where they're going to stop people from getting their own people from getting aid, food, and other supplies. I mean, then it'll just be. I mean, in other words, I don't know if the Palestinians as a whole will be smart enough to, see what's right in front of them, which is that, Hamas is stopping them from getting food, medical supplies, etc. But I don't think Hamas cares. I really don't think. I think they're just
Yeah,
looking
but
to get all the
right.
fanatics
Well,
who
excuse
don't
me.
care.
Let me ask you a question. Okay, I just anointed you. You're a general in Hamas. Okay, and the U.S. ship
Oh
is going to
God,
dock, going to make a pier and dock and start distributing survival goods, soup and chicken and blankets or whatever. So, how can you take
right.
advantage of this to achieve your goals? What can you do taking advantage of that new situation?
What I would do is I basically say, yeah, go and get the food, um, because just for public relations purposes, I'd say yes. If they're going to give you the food, yeah, go get it, etc. Um, and then come back to Rafah, which few of them would do. And then Hamas, in other words, they wouldn't lose any points by that. There really isn't much you could do because if you then turn around and say we're going to blow, the other option is to blow up the port or attack the port surreptitiously, where you get outside players or something, somebody like the Houthis or something, some other fanatical group to do it, and then you condemn that. Like the Germans did in Poland with Poland in 1939. They had a fake Polish group or something. Maybe they can find some way to blame it on the
Right.
Israelis. Uh, that would be the only thing to do. And to be quite honest, the world is so willfully stupid these days. They'll believe anything their side says. So Hamas could actually blow up the port and say, "Oh no, those rockets came from
Or the
Israel."
U.S. In other words,
Or
if I
well,
was
yeah,
working for Hamas, I'd say, okay, guys, come up with some suggestions. How can we create a false flag that the U.S. hospital ship is killing Palestinians. And
Right.
let's do that. No, I'll hand out, and everybody's going to start crying. Get some kids over here, have them crying. These little kids. Don't let the kid eat anything for 3 days. Then we'll bring the cameras in, and so
Right.
they've just been playing it that way right now. And it's I don't know that I don't know that there's as much support as the media seems to be providing, because the media's some parts of the media are in a catch-22. They don't want to be an aiding and abetting an ISIS type mission, but they know that that's what they're doing, because the protests around the world started on October 8th.
Hmm.
Before Israel did anything. Immediately, God
And
bless Hamas. The Israelis deserve it. And it's always college students who've been indoctrinated by their professors, because whatever your political standing is on the agenda, the left agenda, they threw in the Palestinian rights because they made the association. Look, it's apartheid. It's just like South Africa. You support Nelson Mandela, don't you? Well, then you support the Palestinians, because this is another case. This equals that. It's just like South Africa. It's apartheid, and this is the same thing. Like women's. Yeah.
Ken, I lost you for about a
Okay.
minute
I'm
there.
just saying, I
Uh,
don't think that the general consensus is buying all of the protests, the anti-Israel protests that support the Palestinians. I think the general population says it's bad that Israel's killing the Palestinians, but I don't think that they go along with this, poor thing, because the one thing that's not coming out in the media is they don't condemn Hamas. They just talk about
right.
Israel. And they don't say,
Ted
stop firing missiles, release the hostages now. They don't say that.
Ted Cook made that point. We were sitting at the diner, actually, and Ted Cook said, "Well, wait a second. How come nobody's putting pressure on Hamas to release the hostages and step down
Right.
from power,
Yeah.
basically surrender and stop the carnage?" And the fact of the matter is, nobody is putting pressure on, because now in this case, Frank Bradford may well be right. Something was coordinated. Those demonstrations on
Totally
October 8th,
coordinated, backed by
I,
I'm trying to the Open Society thing, the money to organize the protests was linked. I maybe I'm making a false accusation. I believe it was there was funding from Open Society, which is the Soros group. Yeah.
it may well be, but I think Frank may have a point that it was also manipulated by Iran and
Right.
possibly Russia, because it was too. In other words, some of the demonstrations could have been
Yeah.
impromptu, but I would say most of them were too
Absolutely.
organized, and it happened like with less than 24 hours after the October 7th happened. It was within, I mean, I think it was the
Right.
next morning that these massive protests started. So they were all coordinated, which means they knew about October 7th in
Yeah.
advance. So this is a coordinated effort. But what it
To
did
use a
do,
theatrical term, they were waiting in the wings.
they were
You're
waiting.
waiting in the wings. Your cue will be. Yeah.
Right. So they had the script beforehand. So but the funny thing is, what I think it did is that it really probably set back, and I'm saying not just October 7th, but just as much, if not more so, those demonstrations on October 8th may have set back the cause of a Palestinian state, I think by it could be
Yeah.
20 years, because everybody said, "What are you pro?" I mean, I was sitting there. People I know. I was in Colorado at the time, people were saying, what are they protesting? What are they protesting? Israel just had, they thought it was 1,400 people murdered. I mean, just an atrocity that went on. And then they're protesting and blaming Israel. And people were just turned off by it. And certainly the Israelis will now say, hey, the Palestinians in general and their supporters supported what happened on October 7th. Fuck them.
Right.
That's what they're just going to
Well,
say. I mean,
no. In any war, I mean,
really,
there's going to be people who still have empathy for the innocent bystanders in any war. People, you even have empathy for the massacre of the military. The like this stuff with the Barbarossa. The Germans killed this many Soviets. I looked up a chart of deaths for each war. The Russians lost so many people in World War II. It was like 10 times what any other country lost. It was outrageous.
Well, remember that. Well, yeah, I think they lost 3 times what Germany lost, and about 4 or 5 times what Japan lost. But remember, a lot of the people, I mean, I heard one person say half of those deaths were from Stalin's hand. Stalin was just killing people that he thought needed to be killed. So that may balance it out. I don't know if it was, I don't think.
But I mean,
half,
you can have empathy for all the poor innocent soldiers who just went there to be loyal, and why were they put there, and so generally speaking, and that's reasonable, but and it's unfortunate, but you're right. But you and I say that, and then I think other people would say, oh, you're just persuaded by the enemy. You're do or die for Israel, or something like that. To say
something, I have to tell you, the people nowadays, they only see what they want to see and ignore the rest. And therefore, if somebody has an agenda like, on the far left or on the far right, and they're going to ignore all the other things, and they're just going to focus on those things that support their cause. It's very funny because I was telling somebody the other day, I forget who, I said, because they were saying, well, no, the main thing is you just have to stop the war. It's got to be a ceasefire. This is enough. And I said, but that leaves Hamas in power. And they said, yeah, well, it leaves Hamas in power. And I said, and Hamas has said they're going to launch another raid and another raid and another raid. And every time they launch one of these, catastrophic raids to get hostages and kill people and kill civilians, Israel's going to respond even more massively. And it's going to cause, forgetting about Israeli deaths, it's going to cause 10 times as many Palestinian deaths. So in other words, we see what happens if Hamas is allowed to go on as it has. Now, Hamas can get out of it easily, I think. All they have to do is say, you know what? We're changing our charter. We're changing everything. We're changing our educational system. We're going to re-educate our young so that Israel has a right to exist. If we don't bother them, they don't bother us, etc. But I don't think that's a pipe dream that Hamas is going to say, yeah, we're going to change everything around.
Right.
I don't think it's going to.
Right. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah.
So
I think that the Israelis are right in what they have to do. Now, people can argue on how they're conducting the war, but I think their aims, the war
return
aims,
hostages and eliminate Hamas.
Legitimate. Yeah. Well, and I don't think, and by eliminate them, see, Netanyahu made, I'm not a big fan of Netanyahu, but he made several more mistakes, and he said, oh, we're going to wipe out Hamas or something. Well, you're not going to get every Hamas fighter. There's going to be some guy who runs away to Morocco or Algeria. I mean, you're not going to get everyone, but if you remove them from power, I mean, we didn't get every
No,
Nazi
no,
in
we
Germany.
took a whole bunch over here to the US.
Yeah,
They were members of the
exactly.
Nazi Party. The what was that called? The Mockingbird or something. I forget what the name of the project.
Oh,
Paperclip,
yeah,
Paperclip.
yeah. Operation Paperclip. Yeah, when they those were the scientists, people they needed,
And they
intelligence
left a lot of
officers,
Germans in
etc.
charge. They put them back as mayors and local officials. You
Yeah,
know,
that was
yeah,
patent.
and there's
Patent.
the whole thing with the southern half of France, which was sort of an ally with Germany. Vichy, right?
Right,
So that's right. We
right.
didn't get
Vichy
every
France.
Nazi, and a bunch of them got away and went to Argentina. You know.
Right,
And one
but
of them
if
opened
we
up
got
a soup shop in New York, right?
yes,
Remember
right. According to
that Seinberg showed there, the soup Nazi,
yes,
right?
but didn't it turn out that that guy, the soup Nazi, that the actual guy
Yeah,
was
probably.
Jewish? I think, yeah, it's but the fact is that all these but if they remove Hamas from power, if Hamas isn't in power and they change the educational system, I mean, I saw their textbooks translated from Arabic into English by Hamas. This was their own approved translation. And I mean, it was some of the most racist stuff I ever saw. I mean, there isn't, what's his name? Bull Connor, the one who sicked the dogs on the kids in Montgomery, Alabama in 1963. He had nothing on these guys. What was in this textbook was not only against Jews, but against darker skinned Muslims. It was incredible. And that's what they're teaching kids. So you have to redo the educational system. You have to have a massive overhaul there. But if you do that, I mean, I think, Israel would be saying then, okay, we're fine. As long as we get a government in there that's not going to do any, cross-border incursions like that, that isn't going to sponsor terrorism. You get a government in there that leaves us alone, we'll leave them alone. I mean, that seems to be what most Israelis feel and what they want. There's some, not cases in Israel also that want to have Gaza back and turn it into a religious zone or something. There's nothing there religiously to celebrate. There's no Wailing Wall or David's tomb there's nothing. I feel the same way about a lot of the West Bank. But the fact is, right now, I don't think I mean, the way things are now, Israel, I can understand them saying, why give the Palestinians anything? We can't trust them. That's what they're saying. And if there's no trust on both sides, there's no resolution.
Uh,
That's it.
well,
I mean, there's no
I
negotiated
understand, but I mean, at
resolution.
some time, even if you walk away from the stove, you're boiling potatoes, and you don't turn the flame off, and you go out on a date, you come back, something happened. The water boiled off, the
Yeah,
potatoes got burnt, the house burned down. It changed.
right.
Something's going to happen. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it would be. I mean, the solution to this is not complex. It would be that there should be an associated state in Jordan. I mean, that's one. That's me. I'm not. I don't know the territory, but live. East of the Jordan River. Make chop off a part of Jordan and make it Palestine.
Well, actually, the problem that's happening in Jordan now is because I know people from Jordan who are Jordanian Christians, and they say that the Palestinians are basically taking over Jordan, also because the king, who is not necessarily he isn't giving doesn't want to give in to the Palestinians. He's got a more even-handed approach, but his wife is Palestinian.
The Queen.
So
Oh, yeah, I
the
noticed
queen,
her. I
yeah,
thought it was like she had a whole special with some program. I don't know if it was 60 Minutes or whatever. And she gave a
Right.
whole plea thing to the poor Palestinians, and that they were there and
Right.
everything. And it's, oh, well, I mean, it's the whole community of Islam throughout the Middle East.
Well, but the Palestinians right now, yeah, the Jordanian Christians or should I say native
Yeah.
Jordanians, that's how it's called, people who were indigenous to Jordan, because most of the Palestinians, or a great many of them, came in like after the 6 Day War. They fled when Israel took over the West Bank, when they captured the West Bank. A lot of Palestinians fled. They were not driven out, as Alex or somebody would say. Maybe some of them, but the greater part of them actually fled to
Right.
Jordan. And then in the early 70s, there was practically a civil war in Jordan. The Palestinians attempted to take over the government, and they failed. But there was battles and massive, there were actually, pitched battles between the Palestinians and the Jordanian military. And basically, you still have a powder keg there in Jordan. And I guess the king is trying to balance everything so that, he doesn't, have a massive
Well, let me
civil
take a
war.
moment here. I've got this set up. So I'm going to show a video about why the Middle East won't accept Palestinians. It's only 4 minutes, so let's see what they say, okay? Let's do that.
Yeah.
East taking in Palestinian refugees. The onset of a renewed war between Israel and Hamas has led to fears that millions of Palestinian people living in the Gaza Strip may be forced to become refugees. But despite the fact that Gaza shares a border with Egypt, the Egyptian government almost immediately ruled out any possibility of accepting Palestinian refugees. In fact, Egypt is currently constructing an even larger border wall with Gaza than the one it currently has in place. Now, many outside observers have asked why Egypt, a majority Arab and Islamic nation, would turn away the Palestinian people. And of course, many have pointed out that it may serve the political interests of many Arab nations to refuse to accept Palestinian refugees because it allows them to then blame Israel for any sort of humanitarian crisis that unfolds. But the thing is, historically, many Arab nations have accepted Palestinian refugees, and that may be why Egypt doesn't want to now. For example, in 1991, the Kuwaiti government actually expelled nearly 300,000 Palestinians in the aftermath of the First Gulf War, and this represented an astonishing 18% of Kuwait's entire population. So what was the reason? Well, the Palestinian Liberation Organization had actually supported Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait a year earlier. And this support only grew after Iraq began attacking Israel with rockets throughout the war. After Kuwait's liberation, the government considered much of the Palestinian community to be complicit in the Iraqi occupation of their country. And in response, nearly all Palestinians were deported in just a few months. And this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Decades earlier, the Palestinian groups operating in Jordan had come to openly call for the overthrow of Jordan's monarchy in the aftermath of the 6-Day War. At the time, the PLO maintained its own separate army on Jordanian soil and used that armed force to sow chaos. Armed gangs of PLO militants drove around the capital of Amman, robbing families and businesses in the name of collecting financial assistance for the ongoing war of attrition against Israel. When members of the Jordanian police and army tried to defend their citizens from these attacks, they were attacked and killed. The Palestinian political network operated as a state within a state, with militants repeatedly using Jordan to launch rockets into Israel. The Marxist-Leninist Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine even went so far as to hijack multiple planes, diverting the flights to a Palestinian-controlled airfield in Jordan, where the passengers were held hostage. By September 1970, the Jordanian army had finally had enough. A full-scale war with the PLO broke out, and after 10 months of fighting, the Palestinians were driven out of the country. Yet, as a parting gift, a Palestinian terrorist group known as Black September assassinated the Jordanian prime minister. Sadly, the story doesn't end there, because the PLO then moved into Lebanon, where they allied themselves with Marxist and socialist movements that were seeking to overthrow Lebanon's conservative Maronite Christian government. The presence of thousands of Palestinian militants flooding into the country completely destabilized Lebanon, and plunged the entire nation into chaos. Less than 4 years after the PLO was expelled from Jordan, Lebanon found itself in the middle of one of the most bloody and chaotic civil wars in Middle Eastern history, from which it has never fully recovered. In short, Palestinian organizations have not just attacked Israel. They have sowed unrest in many of the neighboring Arab and Muslim countries as well, and this has led those governments to the conclusion that allowing for mass immigration or even just refugee camp resettlement within their borders would lead to domestic unrest for their own countries. And this, of course, only exacerbates the humanitarian crisis for those Palestinian non-combatants caught in the middle. The problem is, as long as terrorist organizations like Hamas and others are elected to represent the Palestinian people, their plight will most likely continue, as neither Israel nor apparently the surrounding Arab nations want to see their own populations threatened by terrorist groups.
There you go. Pretty strong representation, huh? Hey, Mike, turn your mic on. Hey, Mike. Mike, turn on your mic.
Mike's got his mic back
Okay.
on. Where was that? Who did that story? What was the network
let
or
me see
the
if I can
channel or
find it
what?
again. 1 second. Here it is. Why the Middle East won't accept Palestinian refugees. And let me see if I can go back on that. Okay. So, what I can do is, let me look at the link I used and see what that says. Oh, here it is. It's the Y Minutes. It's a YouTube channel, and it's called the Y Minutes, WHY Minutes, and a YouTube channel.
But who? I mean,
So
in
they
other
do
words,
they do now.
are
They got another one up here about Singapore from a year ago. So it says the Y Minutes. It's a YouTube channel. And they also have a website called theyminutes.com. Oh, here, let me just show you that. Whoops. And we'll see it. Here it goes. So they have shows here. Singapore, This Killed Africa, The Fatal Flaw. It says Why Democracy Has Always Failed, Soviets, the McDonald's defeated the Soviet Union, all kinds of things. So it's a guy making little shorts, and some of them are irrelevant. Oh, here's the guy, Nick Freitas. He has 880,000 subscribers. That's pretty good. He's getting close to 1 million. I mean, yeah,
Nick Freitas,
880,000 subscribers.
Right. Now, question: is it a biased, like an opinion, like the pieces on the other side that Alex always
I don't know. I
out.
just Googled it, and I have 2 others, but I'm biased. So the 2 others, I picked that I haven't shown him yet because it's a little tough with this Alex and Jim too sometimes. I got one from CBS News.
Yeah.
Here's another one from CBS News, and it's titled, wait till it stops this commercial, and I'll tell you what it's called. It's called Egypt Not Allowing Gaza Refugees into the Country. So it's 6 minutes. You want to take a look at this one? This is going to be CBS News.
Sure.
So it's not,
right.
It's, let's say, maybe not as biased. And you see this, right?
Yeah.
You can see this.
Gaza, the Rafah crossing remains closed. Thousands of people in Gaza are desperately trying to flee. And on the other side of the border, crucial supplies are not being allowed through. So joining us now from Cairo is CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay. So this is a part of the story, Chris, we haven't gotten to talk a lot about. What are officials in Egypt saying about the Rafah crossing?
They say they want to allow aid to enter, and they haven't been able to reach a deal yet with Israel. For its part, Israel wants to allow those Palestinians with foreign passports to be able to leave, but it appears they're still hashing out the terms of that deal. Meanwhile, we have over 100 aid trucks that are idling on the Egyptian side of the border that can't get in. So, you know, it's a big question now, thinking about what President Biden just said with regard to $100 million in U.S. aid going to the Palestinians. Where will it go? How will it actually enter the Gaza Strip, where people need it the most, if that crucial crossing, the Rafah Gate at the border with Egypt, remains closed on both sides?
Chris, you've covered the region for a number of years. You're now in Egypt, in Cairo, as we indicated to our viewers. President Biden, in his speech, said, I thought it was important, the vast majority of Palestinians are not members of Hamas, but he also said that the Palestinian people are suffering greatly. And we've seen protests around the region in other Arab countries against the Israeli military actions in Gaza, and yet we have not seen, what we haven't seen yet is those states, Egypt, Jordan, agreeing to even allow refugees into their countries. In other words, you see a lot of posturing and a lot of public statements about what Israel is doing and the suffering of the Palestinian people. But the reality is that even before this action, refugees, the folks that were in Gaza, found it incredibly, incredibly difficult to ever even leave Gaza under the best of circumstances. It is called the world's largest open-air prison because they were essentially trapped in the Gaza Strip. So what are you hearing about that side of the story?
Well, you know, officials here have good reason to be careful about letting people from Palestine into their territory. Now, the government can appear to be very pro-Palestinian by not letting Palestinians enter Egyptian territory, because they say they're concerned that as soon as you open these floodgates and the tidal wave of Palestinian refugees start to exit Gaza, you've just transferred Israel's problem onto Egyptian soil, and you have depopulated the Palestinian project, the Palestinian state. We've also spoken to former lawmakers here who say that they're genuinely worried about there being Hamas or other terrorist elements among the refugees that would enter into Egypt. Keep in mind that the border with Egypt and Israel on the Egyptian side of the border, the Sinai Peninsula, is a part of Egypt where the country has been waging a bloody war for several years now with its own homegrown Islamist insurgency that has links to Hamas. So if you were to allow a large number of Palestinians to then enter Egyptian soil, they might continue to wage attacks on Israel. And what would Israel then be inspired or forced to do? They might return fire now on Egyptian soil. This is something that Egyptians simply don't want to risk right now. We also heard from former officials speaking very candidly that it is inevitable that these Palestinian refugees will ultimately have to come here. They just need to give the appearance of having their hand forced. In other words, Egyptian President Sisi now is saying, no, this will not happen, this will not happen. But deep down inside, the Egyptians are worried that there could be a human stampede. They only have 750 Egyptian security personnel there at the border, and by international law, they're not allowed to have more based on previous treaties. They could be overwhelmed simply by human force of those Palestinians trying to get out, and they're not going to allow that. They're not going to allow Palestinian refugees to stream into Egypt until it appears that their hand has been forced, according to these former officials we've been speaking to.
That's really fascinating. You know, there are so many factors that we just are unaware of. But I kept on thinking, you know, what about foreign nationals? I think it's estimated there might be between 500 and 600 American citizens in Gaza. I mean, why not sort of a limited amount of people who have someplace else to go?
Yeah, according to the State Department, it's more like 50 or 60 American nationals with, Palestinians with American passports. Nevertheless, that's a very good question, and that's sort of a a bargaining chip on the Israeli side right now in order to let aid. Keep in mind, there are a lot of people in Israel who might not like the idea of ushering aid into the very place that has attacked them right now, whether or not that goes to civilians or goes to Hamas and people who might carry out more terror attacks. That's something that Israeli officials have to keep in mind when it comes to their own constituency. We've also heard from people within the Israeli government saying that so long as there are Israeli hostages still being held in the Gaza Strip, that nothing else should be allowed to enter the Gaza Strip, and that includes this crucial life-saving aid.
Chris Livesay, with some really, fascinating details there that, you really paint an excellent picture of, again, what we've been talking about all morning long, all week long, is the nuance in this story and how everything isn't as cut and dry as people would want them to be. You want to see people, you want to see the suffering ending. You want to see people be able to find a place where they can keep their children and their families protected, but not everything is so black and white as oftentimes it seems, even for us in the media. So Chris Livesay, thank you very much for that reporting. As always, my friend, stay safe. We appreciate it.
Well, that basically, that report confirmed a lot of what the previous guy had said. And the fact is that, nobody wants a hotbed, a population which is a hotbed of terrorism.
What if what's his name? Adam, the president, the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, made a deal, and he says, listen, I got it from MS-13. If we give them new Chevys, and all they have to do is agree to go to New Jersey, okay? And could get New Jersey to accept the MS-13 membership. It's only about 10,000 members here in New York City. We'll just send them right over the Washington Bridge and let them live in Jersey City or somewhere, maybe a suburb. Don't even go to Newark, New Jersey's going to say, no, thank you. No, thank you.
Certainly not going to, New Jersey's certainly not going to say, sure, let them in. But the idea is, I always felt that the Israelis should have said, and they did at one point, and that's basically how, why the war has been going on for 4 months now, is because Israel said it's very simple. Because some of the Israelis said, you want us to stop the bombing and the incursion, we can probably get the Netanyahu government to agree, because they're looking to stay in power also. If we just say release all the hostages and we'll stop.
Right.
However, and by the way, the Netanyahu government, that was people in the opposition who were saying that, if Hamas releases all the hostages, we'll stop. But what I heard, and again, I just heard this, is that before Netanyahu can even reject it and say, no, we're going to destroy Hamas, he didn't even get a chance. Hamas turned it down. They weren't releasing the hostages. They wanted to get something out of this thing. And the fact is, Hamas is still saying that. They turned down the 6 week ceasefire. The 6 week ceasefire which would have seen about a third or half of the Israeli hostages and a couple of thousand Palestinian prisoners. There would be a prisoner exchange there, basically, and a 6 week ceasefire, at which time other negotiations could be going on, and then if Hamas didn't want to do anything, at least during those 6 weeks, Israel would have been able to get, in other words, there would have been arrangements so Palestinians could leave. But Hamas,
and it would have included a 6 week ceasefire. In other words, no missiles from either side.
Right. 6 week total ceasefire, just like they had a couple of weeks earlier, a couple of months ago. And this time it would have been a 6 week ceasefire. And again, some Palestinians would be able to get out. Aid would have been able to get in, even though it had to be screened. But
much more aid would be able to get in, and negotiations would be going on to see what they could do to make it a permanent ceasefire, which probably still would have had to be Hamas step down in power, or, as one person brought out, the Hamas political arm, the military arm would cede power, and the political arm, which didn't, there seemed to be some conflict between the political and military arms of Hamas. And the political arm may be able to stay, but the military arm would have to go, and they'd have to demilitarize. But these things, they didn't even get to that point. Hamas turned down the 6-week ceasefire. They said all or nothing, and they got nothing. And the funny thing is that a lot of the supporters who you would think, a lot of the people who were calling for a ceasefire, they supported Hamas's turning down of that. They said, no, 6 weeks isn't good enough.
Right.
We want all or nothing. And now
Nothing.
they have
Right.
nothing, because the Israelis aren't going to attack on Ramadan. But what they're going to do on Ramadan, during Ramadan, is they're going to gear up and coordinate how they're going to conduct this operation against Rafah. And they're going to realize that Hamas will be more solidified in their defensive positions. They're fully aware of that. They're probably figuring out how to use the tunnels. All this stuff. Also, they're going to get as many of the Palestinian civilians that are not, put it this way, that are not Hamas and are, unarmed or whatever, just families, get as many as them out so that they can conduct a massive scorched earth, basically, operation. So Hamas is going to, no matter what, Hamas is going to get wiped out. Even if aid from the U.S. and other countries stopped, Israel probably has enough firepower to conduct this operation.
Oh, yeah. You mean,
they can
military aid to Israel? Yeah.
Yeah. Even if it stopped now, there's enough there in Israel to conduct this operation. Now, Hezbollah is also now attacking, trying stuff from the north, but Israel already has about a third of its forces geared up there, and probably and probably most of their air power, because they don't need a lot of air power against Hamas. And they have total air supremacy. So basically, Hamas had at least something to gain from the 6-week ceasefire, and certainly the Palestinians did, and Hamas turned it down. So that's basically, and again, the 6-week ceasefire would have been over Ramadan, which it probably will be anyway. Maybe Hamas knew that Israel wasn't going to attack during Ramadan. But the fact is, Israel can still, they're not going to launch the offensive, but they can still kill Hamas fighters. In other words, they can launch raids into Rafah that are surgical raids, and they have been. They haven't launched the offensive yet, and they've been killing 6 or 7, 10 or 11 Hamas operatives, Hamas guerrillas per day. So again, Hamas, they only have Israel's killed at least a third of their fighting force, or killed or immobilized, at least a third of their fighting force, probably more. So Hamas doesn't have that many fighters left, and they certainly don't have that many arms left.
Well, yeah, right.
In other words,
right. But but Iran, they could get, if they can, they probably have a problem sneaking in arms or anything from Iran. It's not because Israel's on the lookout for it, I guess. But I just wanted to make a comment here for you and the video, which is that with the 2 videos I played, I had selected those at least 3 weeks ago, so they're not current. The 2 videos, they were made earlier. I don't know. I couldn't find a date on when they were made, although I think situations are more or less the same. But I was shocked by two statements here. The last video, the guy said there's Palestinians in Israel, in Egypt, who the Egyptians are fighting with. They're trying to do something to knock out the Egyptian government, and they are likely to attack Israel from Egypt. So they don't want that. So those are two solid reasons why they don't want Palestinian immigrants. And of course, Hamas belligerents, if they want to get into Egypt, they're going to dress up like, little women and, women and children, just the nicest people, get a haircut. And, you're sneaking in. It's not a big deal. You're not going to walk in with carrying a Kalashnikov or something and, or having a big machete, and, and you're going to try to look like a civilian wearing clothes from Target, like the rest of the refugees. And that was this last one. But the previous one where the guy was talking about all of the aggravated situations which happened in Jordan, and they wound up as they were leaving and they got exported to Lebanon. They killed the prime minister of Jordan just for goodbye. Here's a gift. Here's a going away present. And they're just creating havoc and civil war. And there was havoc and civil war in Jordan between the Jordan government and Hamas. And the same, or I guess it was Hamas. It wasn't a PLO. Maybe it was a PLO. And then the same thing in Lebanon. So I had heard that before. Nobody wants them. They're troublemakers. They just don't want them. And but this was more detail in that thing, talking about that egregious actions. And there was another video I didn't play. It was a short. I've heard this woman before, and she said 400,000 Yemenis have been killed by Saudi Arabia. No protests. Syria killed, hundreds of thousands of, no protests. ISIS killed people, no protests. There was no protest against ISIS like there has been against Israel. And then so it's not a real protest. It's just a political act to, kick Israel out. Now,
well, also that in any areas controlled by ISIS, Hezbollah, Hamas, any of these organizations, I mean, I know that with Hamas, there are Palestinians in Gaza who are fed up with Hamas. In other words, they didn't support October 7th, and now they're starving to death. They have family members killed, and they blame Hamas as much as Israel. So, but they can't say anything.
Because Hamas will kill them.
Because they'll be.
Yeah, I know. And they killed, I heard that they had initially when they, before they got elected, they had a civil war there with Fatah, which is a different Palestinian militant group. And they just had two gangs fighting it out, and they won. So it's unfortunate situation. I think personally, without being a political scientist or anything, or certainly not a biblical study or anything, but I just side with the fact I have some people call it like a right-wing viewpoint. Throughout the history of the world, one nation occupies and conquers the territory of another nation. This happened throughout history. Take a look at the history of Sicily, the history of the Ottoman Empire, or through Europe, the Soviet Union, and the same thing with Americans conquering the United States. What do they call it? Destiny. Destiny. What do they call that? Manifest destiny. Right. We're going to go from the Atlantic to the Pacific. So yes, and killed a lot of Indians and put some on reservations, lied, cheated, and steal, and so forth. So you get that through. Every time I've have looked at history, there were times in Germany and forgot the name of it, but these armies, Baptist revolution, no, not Baptist, they surround a city and they say, look, surrender and we'll let you come out and we won't hurt anybody. We'll come in, we'll take the gold, and we'll go home. And as soon as they open the gates,
Right.
the army comes in and kills everybody. You know, this deception.
Right.
It is the way it is. I don't even want to say it's cruel. It's the same like animals eating other animals. You know, it's part of nature. And we've been more civilized, which this nation, which is a very positive thing. The Marshall Plan is amazing. It's amazing. You know, after what Germany did, we let them walk away from it, and we helped them reestablish their country. And the same thing with Japan, and the same Italy. We knew was like, you know, they just got hoodwinked into it. I don't know, but I'm just saying there was compensation, tolerance instead of retribution, revenge, and so it's good. So the UN, Israel, the Jews, through political diplomacy, got the UN to, the League of Nations and everybody had the history of it going, to allocate an area of territory in the Middle East for the Jews to have their own country. That's it. It was an international agreement. I guess it was passed through the General Assembly, not just the five leading states, but you know, the whole assembly. So it got approved. So that's it. So then the Arab nations said, no, I don't like it. No, get out of here. Well, I think Israel had as much rights to it as anybody else. And they tried to make it, I mean, it was stupid to make a thing where it's like Palestinians inside of Jewish Israel, but instead of side by side. But in any event, the Arab states just don't want it. That's it. It's a deal breaker.
Well,
you know?
the Arab states don't want. Nobody wants the Palestinians.
Well, that's the Palestinians. Okay. I'm talking that they don't want the Jewish state,
and they didn't want the Jewish state either. They didn't. And by the way, there was going to be a separate Palestinian state in 1948, but actually it was Transjordan at the time.
It was west of the Jordan River.
Yeah, and they basically, Jordan said, "Now we're taking it over." That was what the 1948 war was about.
And during that time, whoever was governing Jordan had the opportunity to recognize this section as the new Palestine and make it a state and recognized by the UN, and there you go. And they didn't do it. And the people living there didn't protest it. Didn't say, "Come on, make us a state, make us a state, make us." Nothing happened. So,
well, it was. I mean, Alex likes to say, and other people that the Israelis drove out the Palestinians. It's not true. They did. The Stern Gang, especially, and elements of the Irgun, did force out a lot of Palestinians, but not the majority. The majority left. They fled because they were told that the Israelis were going to kill them. And then when the Israelis took over, those Palestinians weren't killed.
Right.
So it turned out it was for nothing. So the Palestinians said they got basically hoodwinked by the Arab neighbors. But instead of taking it out on them, they said, no, Israel's got to give us our homes back. We were hoodwinked. We were cheated. We were conned. So you've got to make up for it. And the Israelis were then saying, hey, you left and you've been gone for like 10 or 20 years. No, you can't have that state back or something like that. And actually, Jordan had it, and the Israelis, there's a couple of things I always remember, a couple of points, and these might be isolated points. But I remember during the Six Day War, when the Israelis took East Jerusalem, they found the Jewish holy sites. The Western Wall was then called the Wailing Wall, and the tombs of Abraham and everything, basically overrun with growth, undergrowth. They were not taken care of at all, and that was by a relatively benevolent regime at that time, which was Jordan, because Jordan probably didn't want to anger the Palestinians there, and the Palestinians said, "Fuck it, fuck the holy sites." So I remember that's why I say Israel will never give up the holy sites in East Jerusalem. You know, even if they decide to have a Palestinian state and give up a piece of East Jerusalem, they're not going to give up all of it. And the reason is because they can't trust the Palestinians. Now the Palestinians are saying they can't trust the Israelis. No trust, no resolution. That's it. And right now, no resolution means no Palestinian
Okay,
state.
I have to show you something here. So watch this.
Okay.
This is a trip. This is really interesting. Let me just get that set up there. You know, I use a browser called Edge from Microsoft, and they have a AI thing called Copilot. Isn't that cute? So I find they give me a much better response than just asking a question.
Just remember one thing about AI. If they say co-pilot now, but later they're going to say pilot.
Okay, so anyhow, I can't believe this. Here's my question. You see that? Were Jews forced out of Arab states in 1948? And the co-pilot, but that has been very political, lefty on things. If I ask it tough questions, it comes and says, and don't forget, you got to get along with everybody, and everybody's got something to contribute, you know, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So it says, yes, Jews were indeed forced out of several Arab states in the 20th century, particularly after the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Here are some key points. Prior to Israel's independence in 1948, approximately 800,000 Jews were living in lands that now make up the Arab world. The distribution was as follows. 2/3 lived in French, Italian-controlled regions of North Africa. 15 to 20 lived in the Kingdom of Iraq, and 10% lived in the Kingdom of Egypt. A further 200,000 Jews lived in the imperial state of Iran and the Republic of Turkey. The first large-scale exodus took place in the late 1940s and early 50s, primarily from Iraq, Yemen, and Libya. In these cases, 90% of the Jewish population left, despite the necessity of leaving their assets and properties behind. The reason for this exodus included persecution, fear, and the changing political landscape. Numbers and resettlement. Approximately 900,000 Jews migrated, fled, or were expelled from Muslim-majority countries throughout Africa and Asia. Estimated 650,000, 72% of these Jews resettled in Israel. In some Arab states, such as Libya, the Jewish community no longer exists. And I might have cut it off by accident, and I got too edgy. So isn't that interesting? That nobody talks about that.
Oh, yeah.
Just the 480,000 Palestinians pushed out. And what about the 900,000 Jews pushed out on the other side?
Well, actually, though, it did say some of them were expelled, some of them left on their own because of...
No, but they were expelled under duress. So they left, no, it says migrated, fled, or were expelled from Muslim throughout.
Right.
Because of the reasons for the exodus. Persecution, fear, and the changing political landscape. You know.
Right. So, but the thing is, but let's just say for purpose of argument, that some were expelled, some fled, and some just left.
Right, which is what you're saying about the other side.
That's what the other side said, but you're absolutely right. If we're going to talk about the Palestinians being expelled or leaving on their own from what is now Israel, then you have to talk about the Jews, which you apparently were twice as many, who were expelled or left on their own from the Arab countries. So, yeah, I mean, there's certain arguments that just don't get taken. Look, I've talked to people, I mean, people have, you know, who are pro-Palestinian, have conveniently forgotten, not all of them, but it seems like most of them have conveniently forgotten October 7th. They say this war is terrible. Why is Israel doing that? And I'm going, why? They said why. We saw why on what happened on October 7th. So the fact of the matter is, people just hear what they want to hear and ignore what they what is inconvenient for them. And as long as that happens, I mean, as far as Israel goes, they don't give a fuck. Israel is going to basically say, look, normally we would care about your opinion, et cetera, but if it's an existential threat, we couldn't care less. We'll get our ammunition, we'll get our arms from wherever we can, or produce it ourselves, and we'll continue to fight this war because we have our existence is being threatened, and the lives of our inhabitants are under threat. And that's basically, all this stuff. Like I've heard Alex say, well, Israel's losing the war. And I'm saying, well, tell that to the Palestinians in Gaza. I don't think they think Israel is losing. And if this is the idea of a Palestinian victory, they could do without it. But the thing is that, but he's saying because they're losing the propaganda war, the public opinion war. But you know something, with existential threats, the public opinion war doesn't matter. And people on the left, also on the far left, conveniently forget that, look, Russia has totally lost, far worse than Israel, the public opinion war in Ukraine. Are they stopping?
Right.
And they don't even have an existential threat. They're just looking to get what they want. There's no existential threat from Ukraine against Russia. Ukraine isn't threatening to wipe Russia off the face of the earth. They're not threatening to kill Russians all over the place. This is just, and the war still hasn't stopped. So this public opinion thing only goes so far. And the other thing I can't figure out is that you've got people who are opposed to the Israeli actions in Gaza saying, and they're criticizing Biden, right? They're saying, oh, Biden's supporting the Israelis, he's too one-sided, etc. So they're going to say, well, let's get Trump in there. Trump would rather just, he doesn't care who does it. Palestinians die, he doesn't give a shit. He's going to be more supportive of the Palestinians. He's going to be far less supportive. So the fact is, I don't understand this thinking where we'd rather go down in flames than have we'd rather, if things are going to be bad, we'd rather they be worse.
Well, that's, no,
So,
that's,
in other
I thought that was a Stalinist or Trotsky. Who the major guy? Trotsky, Lenin, and Marx, right? Well, one of those three came up with the thing. If you can't control it, destroy it.
Well,
I mean, the way Russia handled the invasions from the Germans or definitely from Napoleon, burn the cities so they don't have any supplies. If you can't control it, destroy it. And I'd seen that happen from some, say, communist activists in the Pacific elections and stuff. If you can't control it, destroy it. Just run it out of business, because your opposition, don't give your opposition the opportunity of gaining access to anything worth anything. And if you can't defend it, get rid of it.
But here's the problem. Russia could say that at the beginning of the war in 1941 and early 42, they could say, yeah, burn, don't leave any crops for them. But that's because Russia was fighting for its life, but its life was still there. In other words, it wasn't saying, hey, in other words, burn all of Russia, burn all of the Soviet Union, destroy ourselves so that the Germans won't get anything out of it. Once you're destroyed, once you're dead, you don't even know if the other side's getting anything out of it. I mean,
it's like don't allow them to acquire any assets, but don't commit suicide. Right.
Yeah, that was the idea. But here we have something else, which is that they rather not vote for somebody they feel is not good, and instead allow somebody to get elected who is much worse. What was it Churchill once said? Because Churchill was, anti-communist, and they said, how are you, during World War II, how do you justify supporting the Soviet Union? And he said, if Hitler invaded hell, I would at least make a favorable reference to the devil.
Very
So,
elegant.
you know, yeah, so, well, Churchill was a genius, but and extremely witty. I mean, my favorite quote of his, I'm going to say it on the air, which may be apocryphal, but the way I heard it was that that he was when he was after his first prime ministership or prime ministry, I should say, an opposition leader was coming to his house to talk to him about trying to make a deal or something, and Hitler, excuse me, bad slip. I mean, Churchill was sitting on the toilet, right? And so his valet came, knocked on the door, and said, "Mr. Churchill, somebody from the opposition party is here to talk to you." And Churchill said, "Tell him I'm sitting on the privy and can take only one shit at a time." But the idea is, I'm just a little confused by this whole thing about, I mean, I can understand why the Arab American community in Michigan was during the primary, why they had why they sat out the vote, or basically did not support Biden in protest against his actions. But you don't do that in the general election. They could make a point there because they knew Biden was going to get the nomination anyway. They were sending him a message, but that message doesn't work in the general election. And I don't know. I don't know how smart people are anymore. I don't know how much people think things through. We seem to be getting, as a population, the human race seems to be getting willfully dumber. In other words, it's not that they are unintelligent or anything, but that they are making themselves dumber, because
I think that's true, that the general public is becoming dumbed down, but that's intentional from the school system or who's ever running it. Absolutely. It's not self-inflicted, because through the internet, more and more people are educating themselves about everything. I got to look up tonight. You find a YouTube video on how to clean the drain on a dishwasher, but also, listening to the history of the Sumerian civilization, or listening to stuff about global warming. Everybody's into, like, a lot of people getting more and more stuff off the internet. My son's, he goes through all kinds of the great courses, I think he even paid for it. So there's it's not that everybody is willfully trying to, I mean, dopers, yeah, people are trying to get distracted by going into a trance with drugs or something. There's some part of the population that doesn't want to know and just wants to be simplified. But I think more of the dumbing down is coming from an intentional thing from the schools to make, I think it was like during Dewey, like in the 1920s or something, somebody came along and said, the thing is to make an obedient, compliant population that will go to work and consume. And you're not in revolt,
right?
And
yeah, and the educational system is definitely to blame, but I think also things have gotten things have gotten beyond our ability to control things, and therefore people just say, something, I can't take this. I'm just going to listen to what I want to listen to the things that make me feel good. And I hate to say it, but because a lot, I've been researching, I've interviewed many of these guys. The World War II generation, the generation that went through World War II, was unique in that first they went through a Great Depression, and then they went from there into the Second World War, and everybody was affected by it. In other words, the home front was affected by it. Obviously, members of their family were overseas fighting, and a lot of them were being killed. or come back wounded, sometimes seriously wounded, and they had to make sacrifices. There were rubber drives and everything. They had to cut back on things they consumed. They had to make sacrifices also, and of course, soldiers had to make, in many cases, the ultimate sacrifice. And soldiers, by the way, they were, during the Second World War, they were living. Most of them were living pretty grungily. I mean, it was difficult when you were an infantryman in the field. You may not have enough toilet paper. You got a hot meal every once in a while. Otherwise, it's K rations or compo packs that you could heat it up on the engine of your tank or your armored vehicle. And I mean, you were living in mud, sleeping in rain. It was very difficult. And then you had to get up and go charge a hill or something like that, possibly get killed, wounded, and see your buddies get killed. It was very difficult. So when they came out of the war, they didn't have any illusions. And they certainly didn't have any delusions. So they were their heads were screwed on. So when atomic weapons came in and all this shit came in, they were able to deal with it because they said, okay, wait a second, hold on a second, let's see what's really going on here. What do we really got to do, et cetera, et cetera. They were able to handle it. I don't think people can handle it.
Right. Because yes, I don't think people are getting dumber like that. I mean, but it is the influence of the entertainment and the technology. This everybody is like this, everybody's walking around like this, like this. They got a thing going here. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute, I got to check my mail. So it's the overabundance. I forget that word. There's a big word that used to be popular about 3 years ago. Ubiquitous. The ubiquitous presence of data and content, and it's geared. I'm addicted to it too. I like watching dancing, these little dancing clips, the rumba and this and that, and the performances, or a goat climbing up a mountain, or somebody rescuing a shark and bringing them back in the water. All these things, and they flip, and you don't like it, go to the next one, and it just keeps going and going and going and going. It's like having the climax of the best. They do this. They do the key scenes from movies. Your favorite scenes from the movies, or the famous the best fight scene by Denzel Washington in each of his. He's got this new series where he plays like a guardian, tough guy, and so the best fight scenes, because they're well choreographed, or Godzilla, whatever it is. So they take the clips and they show you the clips, so you don't have to sit through the whole movie. So it's like it constantly being offered the cherry on the cake, and with no effort, for free, and you don't even have to go out in the rain to go to a movie. You could just sit in the chair or stay on the subway and watch it. It's all over the place. So it's made it develops a concept of entitlement. I shouldn't be bothered. I shouldn't be harassed. I leave me alone. I don't need the rest of the world.
Right. And by the way, people aren't communicating.
Yeah, they're not communicating. And then somebody maliciously put in a regime or a paradigm of don't touch anybody. You could be sued. Don't put your hand on that girl's shoulder. Don't you dare stare at her rear end too long. Don't touch that guy. He'll sue you, or he'll hit you and said you hit him first. So it made it like contact, physical contact. Look what happened to Cuomo. I mean, I don't know what kind of guy he is, but it is true. Like he said, that's the way I am. I touch people. I give everybody a hug, and I understand that. That is a thing. I've met people where that's part of their personality. It's, come on, how you doing? And punching the shoulder, that kind of a thing. How many guys like that? They say, hey, how you doing? And punching the shoulder.
I know that.
Do yourself.
Myself.
Right. So all of that was taken away to dehumanize everybody, turn them into like androids. And don't say anything offensive. What did you say? Don't touch. I'm offended by that. So that don't communicate, don't touch, back off, sit down, watch your YouTube. Here's your phone. Be quiet. Don't eat too much. Avoid cholesterol. Don't have any trans fat. Don't. You know, and that's dumbing everybody down.
And it's true. This, and the whole thing about what you can say and what you can't say. And, I knew somebody who had, he was running a theater, and his rule was, and of course this was like 20 years ago. He said, "Look, you can hug anybody, whatever you want to do. In other words, nothing violent or nothing sexual. But if you want to give somebody a hug, if the person says, 'I don't want to be hugged, please, I don't want to be hugged,' okay, you don't hug them from then on. Okay, you learned your lesson. That's it." But nowadays, people will come over, give somebody a hug, and all of a sudden, they're under arrest or they're being charged with something, and they don't even know. I've had, in other words, if I walk over and somebody says, "Well, who are you referring to?" And I said, "Him over there." And then somebody complains, "How dare you call him him or her him or whatever?" I'm just talking English. We're losing, because of these things, we're losing not only the ability to communicate, but the tools that we communicate with. I know people that won't talk on the phone. They won't talk on the phone. They only text. And I'm sorry, when you text, you can't get an intonation. Somebody can say something and you can take it the wrong way because you can't hear the way they're saying it. It is a less, the best way to communicate is obviously in person. So you can use your eyes and your ears, and and you can see what the person is intending. You can get a better idea of what they're intending, and also you can have a direct conversation, so that if somebody says something and you go, "Whoa, wait, what do you mean by that?" And he goes, "No, I didn't mean anything. No, I didn't mean what you, no, that wasn't it." And the other guy says, "Oh, I'm sorry." You can't, it takes 2 days to do that in when you're texting. And some people don't even bother to ask anymore. And once people can communicate, if they can't communicate with somebody else properly, if they don't know how to deal with other people, we're cooked. Of course you're going to have wars and everything like that, because nobody's listening to anybody. Nobody knows how to talk to them. Nobody knows how to talk.
Yep.
And and by the way, I don't think this is a left-right thing or a political thing. This is just a human thing. And another thing, a point that I want to touch on, because what you touched on with Hollywood, when I was a kid, I would, watch the Academy Awards show, right? My parents didn't watch. They only watched the Academy Awards if they were home and that was the main thing on. Okay, they'd watch it. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother. They'd be working, or they'd be doing, work, outside work or housework or something, or they'd be going out with friends or something. It was a big deal for Hollywood, but it's turned into this major event that, covers the world. And I'm sitting there saying, but all it is an award show. It's not actually, they're giving out awards to the movies. You're not even seeing the movies. You're just watching this whole thing, and there's this huge build up to it. And I'm sitting there going, when the Academy Awards started, the industry started to try to call more attention to make more money or whatever it was. But, people are getting so superficial. And then they're worried about AI. It's not that AI, AI, there is a danger of AI replacing humans, but also it's humans replacing themselves, making themselves less relevant or less functional. So
but I think there could be a backlash. I mean, people will take a postulate and a concept like AI, and I'll say, and therefore when this happens and this happens and that'll happen and that'll happen and that'll happen, But, you know, things are not always that predictable. There could be a revolution. There could be a whole movement of like everybody throwing their phones away and so forth. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, I forget what it was. I wanted to watch some TV show or something. She said, I haven't watched TV for 3 years. And every once in a while you run into somebody like that. And she's very active, you know, with volunteer work, and she works and everything. But still, you run into people like that. So there could be a whole revolution like that, or a whole revolution of people could go throw back to and start to live like the the Amish or something. You know, it could be.
Right.
It's not predictable. You could have AI, but something else could happen. Oh, there could be a water shortage. There could be another. AI is not necessarily going to be able to handle another epidemic or pandemic, or there could be World War III. You know, and then we're all walking around trying to find a bottle of water. You know, if we're still alive.
You know, if we're still alive. You know, what's funny though, it's a lot of it has to do, and I had a conversation with somebody where they said, well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. If we keep on going this way, or, you know, or if this, I forgot we were talking about AI, whatever, if this happens, I'll tell you, this is what's going to happen. And they say it, and I go, and my answer was, you mean that it's possible that will happen? And they're going, no, it's going to happen. And finally I said, for how much? For how much? How much money are you putting down? He said, what do you mean? I said, you're stating it as a fact. You're absolutely sure. So put some money on it. Of course, when it came to gambling, then they back down. But people have to be able to say, I believe, or I've been told, these little caveats that we always used to put in.
Look at the homeless epidemic in at least you have it in New York and in LA. Oh, it wasn't predicted.
Yeah.
Nobody even knows what's causing it really down in deep. You know, they might come up with theories and remedies, but nobody knows. The only solution they're having is they don't know why it's happening. They're just trying to confront it on the obvious appearance. Well, they're homeless. Give them a place to live. That's not the problem. You know, I don't think. But they say that, you know, because the rents are so high. The reason there's homeless people is because the rents are so high. Well, that's one theory. But I'm just saying we didn't predict it. It wasn't predicted that it was going to get this severe. You had to go hunting for the people living in homeless encampments under a bridge, under the freeway, something, you know. And
we didn't predict
COVID, right?
That caught us with our heads in the sand. Nobody saw that coming. I mean, I don't want to say nobody, but an overwhelming majority of people did not see that coming, and we got blindsided.
Or the transgender revolution. Nobody saw that coming. Well, maybe some people.
Oh my God. Well, you know, I have to say something. I mean, I'm not criticizing anybody who does it. I mean, you know, if they want, they do what they have to do, what they want to do. Zygazant, they're in control of their own selves. But you know, being a poker player, I was always, you know, I feel that you play the cards you were dealt, and then you try to make the best out of that. And if you can't, you go out and you wait for the next hand or the next hand or whatever. But people don't want to do that anymore.
Some people.
And by the way, well, look, there are people who, you know, in other words, they have a gender change because they really need to. Either they're, you know, it's either that or a psychotic break, or there's something wrong with them biologically. I mean, there was mishap at birth or something. So it's almost necessary. But if a person says, well, I've always self-identified as this, you know, as a man or a woman, and they're the other gender, and I'm going, you know, I always feel that way. I said, well, you know, too bad. I mean, you know, you got to deal with who you are. Again, I'm not taking.
Well, they're going to do whatever they want to do, whatever they can get away with, and whatever they do. And it's cultural. Have you been? You know, it's different. There's a different attitude towards sexual deviance in different countries. like in Mexico or
Oh, yeah.
Greece or Thailand is amazing, you know. I think they call them lady boys or something like that. But you know, we were taking a train. Was that Thailand? I think it was Thailand. And a guy's walking through the train with high heels and fully dressed like a striptease dancer. But it's a guy with, you know, overweight guy with a
Right.
mustache, you know. But it's that's the thing in Thailand. It varies in different cultures, you know. That's
Yes.
all.
Yes. Different cultures have different. They have different. It's
That's
different
right.
cultures. But the fact is, though, I mean, I'm saying on
Yeah.
individual basis. Well, I mean, I used to say to, you know, there were a couple of women I went out with that wanted to get cosmetic surgery. And I
Why?
go,
I
well,
like skinny flat tits that, you know.
whatever. But I'm
I
saying,
know. What are you
well, I
changing
always,
it? That's not what I'm interested in. Exactly. I
yeah.
want somebody
And
that listens.
right. And I don't care if you've got a little, you know, nose tilts the one way or something. But I know people, I had an ex-girlfriend that said she wanted her chin to stick out as
Yeah.
far as her nose. And I said, you go through surgery for that? I mean, surgery? I mean, because I don't, you know, I'm not big on unnecessary
You're
surgery.
an actor. You can just
If
go
it's,
like this, push your chin
yeah,
out.
yeah, no. And actors would get nose jobs and everything like that. Now, if somebody tells them, "Hey, you get a nose job, I can get
Right.
you into, you know, a Broadway show and 2 films, and you'll make, you know, $1.5
Like,
million
oh yeah.
dollars. And if you don't get the nose job, you're
Right.
going to make
Yeah.
zero." Okay, it's a pragmatic reason
Yeah,
to
yeah,
do
yeah,
it.
yeah. The most famous
But
one, I think it was Rita Hayward. She's from Mexico. And the first thing her
right,
agent did was had her hairline moved back. So she had more forehead.
right,
You know, yeah, okay.
right. And but that was for
Yeah,
pragmatic reasons. In other words, they say we can get you more
yeah,
work this way. Sometimes it
right.
doesn't work, but you know, at least you're saying, okay, I'm going to go through this surgery, I'm going to go through this big mess, but I've got to do it if I want to get, you know, far ahead in
Yeah,
my field. All right, that's one thing. But if somebody was saying, I want my nose, my chin to stick out as far as my nose, so I'm going to get this cosmetic surgery, I'm going, what? What do you, just because you have this image of what you would prefer to look like? I mean, there's no pragmatic reason. It's not going to make, you know, make you more, you know, in other words, get you a bigger apartment, get you a bigger income. It's, I mean, it's just, I'm, I don't know. And my parents and all of our parents, all the World War II generation, I mean, they thought it was garbage. There was a guy, I'll just throw this story in. I'm not going to mention names or anything, but he had his chin blown off, his lower jaw blown off
yeah,
during World War II, and he just would just walk around with bandages around there. Had to eat with a turkey baster. He had to like push it down his throat. Guy got married, had children and grandchildren, lived a life, worked, had a little trouble talking, but hey, there are, you know, in other words, that's a disability that a lot of people have. You know, they couldn't verbally talk, so they have to talk other ways. And that, in that case, that's understandable. But anyway, he had a prosthetic jaw that they made for him. But he didn't like it; it was uncomfortable, so he didn't wear it most of the time. He said, "Big deal, you know, if I can if I can get by without this, I'll get by without it." It was a different way of looking at things. Now people are saying, I can't function if I have this pimple on
yeah.
my face. Then put a band-aid over it, you know, um, or treat it. It's just, I don't, I don't know. I think that's probably one of the things that's overindulgence, self-indulgence carried too far, anything carried too far, but too much self-indulgence, I think
Right.
weakens a person.
I agree.
And yeah, and then we have these situations like we have. Everybody says, I want everything perfect. You know, I want to, you know, in other words, make myself as perfect as possible. And I say, well, nobody's perfect. And they say, well, I'm perfect. And I go, well, then you're nobody. But the idea is that people want everything. It was this whole attitude, you can have it all. You can't have it all. Nobody has it all. And even if you got it all, 5 minutes later, you'd want something else. So you wouldn't have it all.
I don't
again.
know. I think, was it you who told me these guys, they met a high school reunion and they were talking about Fred, who's started a clothing company, who's a multimillionaire, and Harry got into real estate and he's a multimillionaire. And then the other guy he's talking to says, oh, I got something much better than those guys. So the guy says, what do you have? He says, oh, I have enough.
No, I didn't know. It wasn't me, but that is great. That is great. When you have enough, that's it.
That's right.
I mean, everybody wants to be a millionaire, but you can settle for having enough.
Yeah.
You know, I might say a million or a billionaire now, or multi-millionaire. But if you say, you know, hey, I got a pretty good life, you know, in other words, I can do most of the things, nearly all the things I really want to do. And the things I can't do, I don't really need and not that important. That's plenty. You're doing fine. I mean, you know, what was the old line that our parents used to say? Eat your peas. There were kids starving in India. And I would just say, mail it to them. I don't know. But you don't even have to say that. You don't have to say, oh, there's people with worse. If you're okay and if you're getting the things that are most important to you, if you could make a list of the 10 things you want most, forgetting about what you need, you got everything you need, you got enough food to eat, and you got a roof over your head, you got the basic necessities, and then you make a list of the 10 most important things. Somebody once told me this. Make a list of the 10 most important things. If you get the top 3, you're doing great.
Right.
If you get more than half of those 10, you're doing great. But you're not going to get all 10. Okay? That's life. You got to make priorities and make decisions. And it's tough. Life's tough that way. But
you know, the interesting thing is that on the way to get number 3 and 4, you might find something else that's not on the list. You might find, what is this? There's a new drink or a new mountain to climb, or another girl who walked down the street who you'd never seen before. But, you know, she turned around and smiled over her shoulder, and that's it. You got hooked, you know. So if you're alive, you know, if you're just going over 10 things that you had decided in the past were your bucket list, okay, but all right, go for it. But, you know, don't ignore what comes up and, you know, might present itself right in front of you. So like, I'm gonna teach you how to surf. It's not on my bucket list. Well, come on, you're gonna have fun. You're gonna enjoy it. You know, give it a shot.
Plus the fact, people change.
Right.
Say, oh, I really want this thing. This is what I want most. And then 10 years later, you're saying, I'm different now. I've gotten older. I don't want.
You know, I think it's good to clear the bucket list every once in a while. I've let go of scuba diving. Have never done it. You know, with a tank, and I don't know what else. Oh, you know, having an amorous relationship with 4 different women.
At the same time. Yeah.
You know what Rodney Dangerfield says about that? It says, I gotta have 3 because they might get bored with me, you know. So
I heard that a different way from somebody else. They said, I always try to go out with 3 women at the same time. And I said, well, you know, why? I mean, that's aggravating. And he says, no, because if the first 2 dump me, I still got the 3rd.
Actually, I would use that when I was looking for work. I would always go out. I'd go door to door sometimes looking for a job. And I say, I got to get 3 offers. It's one of them's going to fail. And then at least I'll have 2 to decide amongst, you know. But anyhow, yeah, so
Right.
that's good to have kind of a more present function. Actually, I was thinking that would be an interesting thing to go through things you've removed from your bucket list, even if you never made a bucket list. You know,
Mhm.
in other words, most people have skydiving, free fall skydiving on their,
Right.
and somebody else put it on their list. You got to do this. I go like, I can live without that. You know, I don't have to do that. Or you know who does a lot of bucket list stuff is Joe Rogan. But you know, like, have you ever been in
Oh,
an
really?
isolation tank? Remember that was real popular a couple of years ago? I've
Yeah,
never done that. I
yeah.
don't, you know, I could skip that.
Look, if there's something you don't
Yeah,
really want to do, you skip that
take that
right
off
off
the
the
list.
bat. But even things you want to do, how many people say, I mean, and when I was a kid, I'd say, I'd love to go into outer
Yeah,
space. I'd love to go to the moon or something. And yeah, it's a great experience, but there's a few
yeah,
drawbacks also. That's another thing. We begin to realize that some of the things we want may not be worth the pain and suffering it entails
right.
in doing it. You know, I mean, people say, I want to go bungee jumping, but they have a fear of heights. So I'm going, well, are you trying to get over your fear of heights? No. I said, then I don't know if bungee jumping, you know, is going to really be your thing. Sometimes, you know, we got what again, our parents used to say, when you order too much food, we got big
Right.
eyes.
Don't let your eyes
I don't
get
know if you
bigger
ever
than your
heard that.
stomach. Right.
Yeah, exactly. You sit there and say, wow. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, there was an ice cream place in Queens called
Yeah, sure.
Jan,
Jans.
and they had Jan's ice cream, and it was one of the few places. They and Howard Johnson's and Baskin Robbins were the only places that had like multiple flavors, all these different types of flavors, and they had something called the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
I remember it was like $6.95, which would probably be
Yeah.
$75 today. Um, and it had 24 large scoops of ice cream. And my brother and I were saying, that's what we want to get, the kitchen sink. That's, you know, one day we're going to get the kitchen sink there. And one day we were able to get it. My parents said, all right, we'll splurge. You can have the kitchen sink. We ate it. We ate all of it, split it down the middle, and both of us were
Oh, yeah.
sick the next day.
That's right.
Because
That was a
you see
chain.
something. Yes. Well, it
Yeah,
was a
but
small
because I've
chain.
been there.
They were
Yeah.
like,
Jan's, the kitchen
yeah,
sink. I
they were like,
remember that.
right, right. But you know, sometimes you say, if you finally ate it, and you can imagine if either one of us would have eaten it by ourselves, and we had all these different flavors in there. We had mint chocolate chip and, you know, cherry vanilla and caramel, whatever. So we were destined to get sick. But but the fact is, you see this and you say that looks great, but it may not turn out to be great. People go into marriages thinking, gee, we'll get married and everything will be good. It'll be all good stuff. We'll never argue.
Yeah.
We'll never get, you know, bored or something like that. It'll be great. And then it turns out to be, well, there's ups and downs and things like that. And then nowadays people just say, oh, I'm
That's
leaving.
right. They just
It's
walk
not
away.
perfect. So they just walk away. And I this is nobody's realistic
Yeah.
anymore. They, I don't know. I mean, that's why, I mean, we're, you know, it's funny. We got from these discussions about these specific news stories into this, like, you know, universal
Yeah.
overview of the human race. But it's interesting because I think that this is part of the reason. A lot of the things you were just talking about are really part of the reason that we're in. You know, we talk about how did we get into this situation where people are just invading left and right, or they think they can kill whoever they want for their own political cause or something. I mean, that's been going on for a while, but the idea is that it's also, a lot of it has to do, a lot of our problems has to do with the fact that we just have an unrealistic, overindulgent, self-indulgent, um, you know, extremist view of how our lives are supposed to be. That has nothing to do with the way
Right.
things are.
Okay, so let's call it a day there because we got it 8 o'clock. It's been a good
Yes,
conversation.
that's
though.
right. We had a good conversation, and that was good. And you made some really great
okay.
points.
Good. Well, we're in agreement,
tell
but
you,
you know, but it.
I know, but you made some really good points that
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
make. So
Thanks. Okay. Hope to see you
I
next
just
week.
want to compliment you.
Okay.
Okay, we'll shoot for next
Okay.
week if possible.
Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, anybody watching? You've been watching Going Viral on the 13th
Cheers.
of March, 2024. And hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.